Hi guys, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the SU-122-44, the Tier 7 Soviet Premium Tank Destroyer. This tank is available from the gift shop. It's also available from the tech tree for 6,750 gold. And the question we're going to be asking today is this tank worth 6,750 gold? So as per usual, let's start with the history of the tank. Now, the SU-122-44 never actually existed. It didn't even make it into prototype stage. It's a paper tank. It only exists in blueprints. But what the blueprints show was that it was an assault gun mounted on the chassis of a T-44, making it quite fast and mobile. However, as I say, it never made it out of blueprint stage. Again, the information is very sketchy. It's very confusing regarding Russian tank destroyer history from about 1944 onwards. The design for the 122-44 was put forward in 1944, and some sources say it was designed as a successor to the SU-100. However, the SU-100 was designed and went into mass production in 1944, the same time as the blueprints for the SU-122-44 were drawn up. So to say it was a successor to the SU-100 I don't think it's very accurate, because both blueprints, both tanks were designed at the same time. So I find that information hard to believe. Other information about this tank is that it never made it out of blueprint stage because the Russian military preferred a third tank destroyer that was designed and in 1944, and that was the SU-100M, which was a rear-mounted, actually SPG, not a tank destroyer, but it was a rear-mounted SPG based on the chassis of the T-34-85, not the T-44. However, even though some sources, as I say that the SU-122-44 was scrapped due to the Russian military preferring the SU-100M, the SU-100M was also a tank that never made it out of design stage, and it was designed at the same time. The SU-100M2, not the SU-100M1, the SU-100M2 was another design put forward at the same time. The M2 was basically built on the chassis of the T-44, just like this tank. But again, that tank never made it out of blueprint stages. And finally, around the same time, late 1944, the SU-101 was designed as a successor to the SU-100 again, which I find very confusing because they were being built and the designs were put forward at the same time. But the SU-101, which is in-game, was actually built. There were two tanks built, SU-101 and the SU-102. Both of those tanks were built as prototypes, but were scrapped after one prototype or two prototypes were built, mainly down to World War II ending. So the information is very confusing as to what tank actually was designed to replace what tank. They all seem to have been designed at the same time, side by side. Only one of those tanks actually made it into production, the SU-100. Only one of those tanks made it into prototype, the SU-101 and the SU-102. But yeah, the SU-122-44 was consigned to the pages of history as just a blueprint. Very confusing. But we're going to move on. So we're going to be comparing the SU-122-44 against all its other Tier 7 premium tank destroyer rivals, just to see how it adds up on paper. It's going to be up against the other Russian Tier 7 premium tank destroyer, the ISU-122S, the German E-25 that's sadly no longer available in the game, the British AT-15A, and the T-28 Concept, the American premium reward tank. Starting off with the hit points, unfortunately, the hit points are a negative. It only gets 840 hit points. That means that this tank can be 1 hit killed, it could be 2 hit killed, it could be 3 hit killed by most of the tanks it's going to be facing, because the SU-122-44 does not get special matchmaking. It will see Tier 8s, it will see Tier 9s, and Tier 8s and Tier 9s are going to be able to 2-hit kill you. And in fact, a lot of the tanks it faces are going to be able to 1-hit kill you, down to the low number of hit points. Only the E-25 gets less hit points, and that's only by 10. The SU-122S, the T-28 Concept, and the AT-15A all get significantly more hit points, increasing their survivability by quite a big margin. I'm surprised at how many times I get 2-hit killed in this tank, but yeah, 840 hit points, definitely definitely on the low side. It's also a light tank. It comes in at 33.2 tons. Now that makes it the second lightest of all the tank destroyers up here. Only the E-25 is lighter. And it's kind of a negative for the tank because it means you're also susceptible to ram damage. Enemy tanks that ram an SU-122-44 can do significant damage to it down to its low weight. It's also a little bit deceiving because whereas the E-25 is a very, very small tank, it's very, very light, you don't find E-25s trying to ram enemy tanks to death because the E-25 is a very, very small tank and you're probably going to ram yourself to death before you ram anyone else to death. The SU-122-44 feels like a much bigger tank when you're driving it. It actually feels much heavier than it actually is, and when you consider it's not that much heavier than E-25, sometimes the blood rushes to the head and you think you're going to get a ram damage. You end up doing more damage to yourself than enemy tanks by ramming them down to its low weight. The engine power on paper looks like a weakness. 500 horsepower engine. It's definitely the weakest engine on paper. The ISU-122S gets a more powerful engine, as does the E-25, the AT-15A, and the T-28 Concept gets a huge engine, 960 horsepower. So 500 horsepower on paper is the worst engine up here. However, due to the fact it's a very, very light tank, the low engine power really doesn't matter because you've got a very, very good horsepower to weight ratio. In fact, of all the tanks up here, only the E-25 is better. So the SU-122-44 will accelerate very, very well, and it will also reach its top speed, which is a positive for the tank. 47.5 kilometers an hour makes it the second fastest of all the tanks up here. Only the E-25 is quicker, but it gets a good horsepower to weight ratio. It's very, very fast, and on top of that, its ground resistance, which isn't shown here, is very, very good. It gets much better ground resistance than the tank is given credit for. So it accelerates well, it's got a high top speed, and in addition to good ground resistance, it also gets an amazing traverse speed. 42 degrees per second is very, very fast, and it takes a lot of players by surprise because normally when you come across a front-mounted tank destroyer and you're in a medium tank, you think you can get to their side, you think you can get to the rear very easily. I think the traverse speed of this tank takes them by surprise. So what we have here is a game on Windstorm, and unfortunately it was a big, big defeat. Half our team are already dead. Basically what happened was, if you look at the mini-map, we had 6 light tanks and medium tanks. None of them went middle of the map, and the enemy team just rolled straight down through the middle of the map. Now I'm dealing with a T-44 platoon, which is quite interesting because, as I say, this tank was based on the T-44. So I've put a couple of shots into, or one shot into T-44. His platoon mate is coming around, and RT. Yeah, I was quite lucky the shot went into the tracks. It's killed my commander. I haven't noticed yet, and that probably caused me to miss that shot. So I've got a dead commander. The tank isn't performing as well as it normally should. He's rushing me, and look at this traverse speed, even with a dead commander. You can imagine it's quicker with a commander, but look how much difficulty. He got to my side, I'm reversing so he has to go upslope. And this guy is having severe trouble trying to circle me to death, so we can swing around and finish him off. You can't do that in very, very many other tank destroyers, at least ones that are forward facing. The gun traverse speed is very, very average. It's similar to the ISU-122S and the AT-15A. It's faster than the T-28 Concept, and it's not as quick as the E-25. But when it comes to forward-mounted tank destroyers, really, you pretty much can ignore the gun traverse speed. It's more important. The gun arc is much, much more important. Moving on to the view range, unfortunately, we come to another negative for the tank. The view range is not very good. In fact, it's awful. 330 meters of view range on a tier 7, not very good at all. All the other tank destroyers have it well beaten. 350 for the ISU and the AT-15A, 360 for the E-25, and 370 for the T-28 Concept. 330 is not good, and you're definitely going to have to use optics of some sort on this tank to boost that view range. The signal range, however, is a strength. It's got very, very good signal range, which is quite surprising for a Russian tank. In fact, only the E-25 has it beaten. It's got significantly better signal range than the ISU-122S, the AT-15A and the T-28 concept. It means that you're not going to lose contact with what's happening on the battlefield. When it comes to armor, on paper the armor does not look great. It only gets 90mm of frontal hull armor. That equals the SU-122S, is better than the E-25, but is significantly worse than the AT-15A or the T-28 concept. The side armor is not great either at 45mm. Now that's worse than the ISU, it's worse than the AT-15A, and it's worse than the T-28 concept. In fact, only the E-25 is worse, and at 45mm on the rear, again the rear armor is not great. The ISU-122S has it beaten, as does the AT-15A. It only beats the E-25 and the T-28 concept, so on paper the armor doesn't look great. Popping into Tanks GG, let's have a better look at this 90mm of frontal armor. Now, the SU-122-44 is incredibly well sloped. You can see that the sloping on this tank is very, very good, very, very extreme, and that obviously increases that 90mm of armor up to much higher effective levels. You can see that the lower glacis is actually about 130 to 140 in areas. The upper plate, or the very well sloped upper plate, it jumps from about 150 all the way up to 170 in some areas. So it's very, very effective against lower tier tanks. However, tier 8s, tier 9s are just going to laugh at your armor, going to be able to pen you frontally, no problems. If you're in a lower tier tank and you do find yourself facing an SU-122-44 and having problems penning him, just remember there is a weak spot. There is a viewport on the front of the tank, you can see it here, that is raised from the chassis of the tank, and it's very, very flat, just beside the gun mantlet. So if you are facing one of these things frontally and having problems penning him, go for this viewport. It's only 90mm of armor, but just try. It would probably be better not sitting in front of one of these tanks because the gun is awesome, but we'll get to that in a moment. The gun mantlet is very, very troll on this tank, like it is on a lot of Russian tank destroyers. You can see that the effective armor, it moves from around 200 up to 500, 600, 700, 800 in areas. The gun mantlet, very, very troll, and sometimes when you're trying to shoot these tanks, no matter where you try to shoot them, the gun mantlet just seems to have a magnetic capability and suck your shells into it. Also, if you're driving an SU-122-44 and you know someone's going to be shooting at the front of your tank, don't forget you can always wiggle, and maybe they might end up hitting your gun mantlet. Very good gun mantlet, but the armor really is only effective against lower tier tanks frontally. Now, from the side armor is terrible. It's only got about 80mm of side armor. It drops down to 75 in areas. The rear of the tank is bloody awful as well. 75mm, 15 in places, and then the roof of the tank and the roof of the gun mantlet. By the way, the gun mantlet, top of the gun mantlet is only 15mm thick, but very difficult to hit it here. The gun mantlet is very good, so if you're trying to shoot this tank frontally, you're not going to get much chance of getting a shot into the upper gun mantlet. The roof of the tank and the roof of the engine deck are very, very poorly armored at 15mm. In fact, the base of the tank is only 15mm, and the area above the tracks only 15mm. You've got a side armor here that's only 15mm. So the side armor, the rear armor, and the roof and bottom of the tank are all very poorly armored. What it means is that arty will do a lot of damage. Tanks firing HE will do a lot of damage to this tank. You're going to get one hit killed by tanks firing HE. You're going to get one hit killed by arty. And even if tanks firing HE or RT misses, splash damage tends to do a lot of damage to this tank due to the fact you've got so many areas of very poor effective armor. So the armor is not fantastic. However, it can work, especially when you're top tier. And for a tank destroyer, it's actually okay. So let's talk about this gun. The SU-122-44 comes with a 122mm D25S. It's a standard Russian 122mm. But what's impressive is that this is actually the final gun that comes on the SU-152, the regular in-game Tier 7 tank destroyer. So this is a premium tank that comes with the same final gun as the regular in-game tank, and that's quite unusual for a premium tank. Usually premium tanks are slightly undergunned compared to their in-game rivals. But the only difference between using this gun on the SU-152 and the SU-122-44 is the rate of fire. The rate of fire is better on the SU-152, therefore the DPM is higher, but other than that the guns perform very, very similarly. And it's a very, very good gun. It's not perfect, it has its faults, we'll get into that in a moment, but it is a very good good gun. 175 millimeters of penetration is good against Tier 7s and below. It's okay against Tier 8s, but it is going to struggle against Tier 9s and some heavily armored Tier 8s. The premium ammo is not great at 217. It's okay, but there are going to be Tier 9s you're going to struggle to pen even firing premium ammo at. However, it's not about really so much the penetration as the alpha damage. It gets the standard 390 alpha damage. Now, considering you're putting out 7.5 shots a second, which can be improved with crew skills and equipment, at 390 alpha damage, you can get the DPM on this tank up to 3,100, 3,200. The DPM is absolutely insane on the SU-122-44. So if the gun behaves and it's able to hit its targets and the penetration is good enough, then this tank can do a massive amounts of damage very, very quickly. The alpha damage and DPM are what this tank are all about. However, the accuracy is not great at .41. Typical Russian, sometimes it'll snipe cupolas from across the map, and other times the shot isn't even going to reach the target. The aiming time is also quite poor at 2.9 seconds. Now that's very, very significant because of a couple of other problems with the gun. You see, the gun arc on this tank is not very good. Because the gun arc is very, very narrow, it means that quite often you're going to have to move the hull of your tank in order to track a moving target, and as a result you've got to constantly go through that 2.9 second aim time over and over and over again. Sometimes you're better off just taking snapshots without being fully aimed, or sometimes that's the only choice you have when you're fighting against fast moving tanks. Also, the gun depression is very, very poor on the tank at 4 degrees. Some sources say it's 8 degrees, but it's not. You've got 4 degrees of gun depression. That means that it's very difficult to use this tank on slopes. It's very difficult to use this tank on hills. You're going to have to expose a lot of your tank in order to be able to get shots in. Also, the gun elevation is very, very poor. So if targets are above you, sometimes it can be quite hard to get your gun up to hit them. So the gun handling is not great. You've got poor aim time. You've got a very, very narrow gun arc. You've got poor gun depression. The accuracy is not great. And on top of that, if you're fighting against a lot of higher tier tanks, you are going to find the penetration lacking. Although not related to the armor, another thing you need to bear in mind when playing the SU-122-44 is just how small and stealthy this tank destroyer can be. I know here it doesn't look very small, but I like putting things in context. Compared to the E-25, the SU-122-44 is quite a big tank. When you're playing this tank, it feels quite big, but it's not. Let's get some normal tier 7 TDs in here as well. SU-122-44, yes, it's bigger than the E-25, but let's look at it in comparison to some other TDs. SU-152, much bigger than the SU-122-44. ISU-122S, again, even bigger still. ISU-122S, much bigger than the SU-122-44. Compared to something like the T-25-2, the American Tier 7 TD, yes, the SU-122 is smaller. T-25AT, very similar tank to the SU-122-44. Very similar guns, very similar profile. But again, the T-25AT is much bigger than the SU-122-44 is. And then we come down to some truly big tanks. The AT-15A, significantly bigger than the tank. And then we've got the T-28 Concept, much bigger. The SU-122-44 is a very small tank. It looks big, but it's only big compared to the E-25. Compared to most other TDs, the SU-122-44 is very small and it's very stealthy. So to sum up, what you've got is a very fast, maneuverable, stealthy, small tank destroyer. It can be quite sneaky. It's got extremely good DPM, and its armor and gun are very good when it's up against its own tier or lower tier tanks. Gun and armor not so good when up against higher tier tanks. The signal range, very good, but the view range is a little bit lacking, and the gun handling can be a little bit frustrating. It's got Russian accuracy, poor gun depression, poor gun arc, long aim time. However, the rate of fire and DPM kind of help you overlook those problems. So let's check out this gun in action. We are here on Muravanka. It's a tier 9 game, so pretty much the worst matchmaking this tank can get. But the reason I'm showing you this replay and the gun in action is because someone made a comment on a recent review. And they said, why do I always show good games? It gives a false impression of the tank. Well, no, it doesn't. If you show good games, it shows what the tank is capable of. I don't show just good games to give a false impression. I show good games because it shows what the tank is capable of, and it also gives me an opportunity to show more of the tank. If I showed 2 minutes of gameplay before I got derped by Artie, you're not going to learn very much from the replay. So the better the game, the longer I'm alive, the more I play, then I get a bigger opportunity to show off the gun. And you could see the first 2 shots, neither shot went anywhere near where I aimed. The first shot in the AMX 1390 went high. That shot in the WZ didn't even go near the target. That shot misses the AMX 1390 and only tracks him. So you can see that the gun can be very, very troll. Trying to get shots. Oh, there we go. We've just bounced on an AMX 1390. The gun is extremely troll. And I picked out this replay just to keep that guy who made the comment happy. This is a very, very bad game. At least it was a very, very poor game, but it shows off just how frustrating the gun can be. And it's not one of the better games I played in the tank. But I like to try and keep people happy. So here we go. You're seeing how troll the gun is. I'm playing this game much like I play a lot of games. I start off by playing passively and then I go into a more of an active role. But I've fired about 5-6 shots so far and haven't done any damage whatsoever. And it's not as if I'm shooting, heavily armored tanks. I'm, missed 3 shots on an AMX 1390. I think I missed a shot in an STA-1 as well, not quite sure, but I'm wondering whether or not I should move forward and maybe try and get into a position where I can get shots here. But, ooh, there's that long aim time. Didn't have enough time to aim at the SU-122-S on the enemy team. You can see I'm looking for outlines. Now, I have nothing to shoot. Look, I have so little to shoot out of this guy. But yet, for some reason, I'm able to snipe just the smallest of targets. And this is what this gun is about. I mean, it's just troll. You can miss, you can hit, you can see Tiger 88, I've got a red reticule. He's hull down, he's actually gone into a very, very strong position. I've actually switched to HE. I'm just wondering whether or not I could do any HE damage. And I miss. So, he disappeared, but I miss. And this is just how troll the gun can be. Now, usually I would have picked a replay where it's a bit of both. I think the overview game is a bit of both, but here we go. I'm back on regular ammo, looking for shots, and we can pen the side of a Jagdtiger. He's turned. He's coming at an angle. Going to be difficult to pen him, so go for a blind shot. Not quite sure if that went in. We'll see when he reappears. So that shot didn't seem to have gone in, but that one did. So you see the rate of fire is good, and even though I'm having a bad game, I'm up to 940 damage. So we've been flanked, we've lost the other flank. I'm moving back to try and support. You can see that the tank is fairly fast, fairly maneuverable, and I've got the side of an STA-1. Okay, aim, and a bounce. This gun. These are lightly armored tanks. I should have no problems penning. So take a shot in the move, and obviously it doesn't go in. But I got spotted, and there are 3 RT in play, so can't hang around, got to move. Type 62 on the enemy team is having a decent game. Okay, we've got the side of an STA-1 again. And he reverses just as I fire, and again, 0 damage. His tracks eat the shot. This is just how troll this gun is. So, when we do hit, we're doing nice damage. Someone has tracked him. No, maybe not. We go for a blind shot. Again, not sure whether or not we hit him. But this is the gun at its absolute worst. Extremely troll. Now, I have put up replays on YouTube of other people playing the SU-122-44, or even better games I've had in the SU-122-44, where the gun behaved. This is just extreme. This is probably the negative part of the tank. Now, I haven't really had an opportunity to show off the biggest strength of the gun, which is its rate of fire and its DPM. I've just been spotted, and as I say, thankfully, enemy RT have been taken out, so I don't need to worry about them. Just move into cover, and I'm going to wait for this Tiger to advance. Now, I've got nothing to shoot at, but yet, there we go. We were missing all our shots, and yet we managed to snipe the cupola on the Tiger. And you can see how much trouble he's having penning me from distance. So when you're up against your own tier, even tier 7 heavies, there's a problem. But again, I've got nothing to shoot at, and the gun behaves. So sometimes the gun behaves, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it does it in the same game. It's very, very inconsistent, so while it's a great gun and I love it, sometimes it can just troll you. On the other hand, sometimes the gun behaves. I'm playing here on Mountain Pass. I've used my speed and mobility to flank the enemy tanks across the river. And I'm just planning to do damage until an SU-100Y appears behind me. So we've taken out one tank. And that was an old man reaction shot. Cheeto gets a side shot. So, at the moment, I've got no support over here. Once again, I'm not top tier. Tier 7, Tier 8 game. But I'd love to rush. I would love to rush this Cheeto, but I can't. Not with an SU-100Y around the corner. So we'll speed it up. Cheeto appears. We take off over half his health, or 2/3 of his health. And he doesn't want to come out poking. Finally, I get some support. CTC comes across the river, and I decide to go for it. So I've got 579 hit points. I can take a hit from this SU-100Y and shoot him on the move. This tank is very good at assassinating tanks on low health, but here's the gun behaving. So the gun is behaving. KV2 on low health in the distance, back on normal speed. Go for a blind shot. There's kill number 2. M6 in the distance, 400 hit points. There's kill number 3. Or kill number 4, I should say. And here we go. IS-3 trying to go for his lower glacis, and the shot goes high. So sometimes the gun is great, sometimes not so good. IS-3 doesn't seem to be that interested in me. I'm playing it carefully until he decides to go for, I think that's, yeah, the CDC. Now, while I can't pen the front of an IS-3 reliably, what I can do is pen his side. So, AMX has reduced him to 268. We swing around, we aim carefully, and shot goes into his spaced armor. But the rate of fire means I can move down before he can re-aim. I aim under the spaced armor, take him out for kill number 5. Now, all of that happened in about 4 minutes. From the time of the first kill to the time of the 5th kill was about 4 minutes. But sometimes the gun behaves, sometimes the gun doesn't. Let's talk about crew. Now, I've heard some people describe this as not a good crew trainer. It's only got 4 crew members because it was built on the chassis of a T-44. As a result, there were only 4 crew members, and it doesn't match some of the higher tier Russian tank destroyers, but it's not that bad a crew trainer because, again, putting things into context, when you take a look, let's bring the SU-122-44 up here. You've got 4 crew members, okay? But you've got a lot of Russian tank destroyers. In fact, there are 2 Russian tank destroyer lines. So all the way from the SU-76 down at Tier 3, it matches the crew configuration. So you can train the SU-76 crew, the SU-85B crew, the SU-85 crew, even the SU-100 crew can all be trained in the SU-122-44. And then when you move to Tier 7, you've got the SU-100M1, you've got the SU-101, all of which can be trained in the SU-122-44. So it is a perfect match for a lot of Russian tank destroyers. But as I say, there are 2 Russian tank destroyer lines. So when we come to something like the SU-152, the ISU-152, in fact, all the way up to the Object 268, we'll get it eventually. And the other Tier 10, the Object 263, you'll notice that all of these tanks have an extra loader. So yeah, it's not fantastic if you're going to be training up high tier crews, because you're always going to have one loader who isn't getting the XP benefit from playing in the tank. When I play the SU-122-44, I tend to alternate the loaders so that I use one loader for a few games, then I use the other loader for a few games, but it doesn't make it the easiest to crew trainers. But is it a bad crew trainer? As I say, when I put it into context, not really. It trains up pretty much most of the Russian TD crews. Well, up to the SU-101 at tier 8. At tier 7 on the other line, then you're going to start running into problems with an extra loader. So definitely, as a crew trainer, it's not perfect, but it's not bad, as some other people have said. So let's talk about equipment. Now, the SU-122-44 is a very versatile tank. It can be played aggressively, it can be played passively, sometimes both in the same game. It depends a lot on the matchmaker and whether or not you're top tier. But as a result, there are lots of viable pieces of equipment, starting off with the wet ammo rack. That is one piece of equipment that is probably not worth time putting on the tank. It's very expensive. I think I played over 30 games for the review, and I didn't get ammo racked more than once or twice. Waste of time for the tank. Better things you can put on the tank and better things you can spend your credits on. A toolbox is viable if you're new to the tank and you're playing it for the first time and you don't have a repair crew. This tank will get tracked quite a bit. It's a forward-facing TD, so getting tracked in this tank can be death for it. If you've got a spare equipment slot and a spare toolbox, go ahead, put a toolbox on. It's not going to do the tank any harm. However, I do think there are better pieces of equipment. Filling the tanks with CO2, complete waste of time. You don't get set on fire very often. Enhanced torsion bars, yes, it's possible to track yourself in this tank. It is quick enough to do that, but it doesn't happen often enough to warrant putting on the tank. Enhanced gun laying drive is something I don't use on the tank, but is very, very viable. One of the weaknesses of the SU-122-44 is its aim time of 2.9 seconds. This will make it significantly better. It is viable. I tend not to use it, but it's really up to you. I know lots of players who like using the gun laying drive on this tank. Cyclone filter to improve your engine durability, complete waste of time. Coated optics, again, viable. It is viable to put coated optics on this tank, mainly because it's down to your playstyle. If you like playing this tank aggressively and like more like a medium tank, wolf packing with medium tanks, then coated optics are definitely something that you could put on the tank. It's not going to do you that much good. It's only going to get you 33 extra meters of view range, but it will take you up to about 370 meters. So really, it's up to you. I prefer using binocs over coated optics, but again, no, I know lots of players who use coated optics. The reason I use binocs on the tank is because it's a little bit situational. If you get the tank into a city map, I find that the coated optics, I'm going to be moving around. City maps are usually quite small. 330 meters of view range is okay in a city map. If it's a big open map, then I much prefer having binocs over coated optics. And personally, I tend to play the tank more passively at the beginning of games, then move into active mode towards the end of games when tanks are damaged and maybe one-hit kills. But really, it's up to you. You definitely need one or the other. It's down to your playstyle. I opted for binocs. Medium caliber gun rammer, absolute must on this tank. This gets over 2,900 DPM, which is insane. Put a medium caliber gun rammer on there and a good crew, and you get over 3,000 DPM. Definitely worth putting on the tank. It's a very, very good equipment addition. Medium caliber spawn liner, absolute waste of time. Artie's going to one-hit kill this tank, even if you have a spawn liner on it. So yeah, don't think it's worth it. Think there are better pieces of equipment. And improved vents is viable. I use improved vents on the tank, but again, I know players who swapped out vents and prefer to use the gun laying drive. It is really up to you. I prefer using vents because it helps me with a lot of areas. I can get up to 421 meters of view range with vents and binocs and crew. So really, it's up to you. And then the camo net is viable on the tank as well. If you're going to be playing it more passively, if you prefer playing your tank destroyers more passively, then binocs Binox and Camo Net are two perfectly good choices. I went for Vents, a gun rammer, and Binox, but as I say, choice is up to you. Okay folks, time for the overview game, a game where I try and show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay. We are here on Malinovka. It's a tier 8 game, so not top tier, but on the other hand there are only 2 tier 8s on the enemy team. KV-4 and a Jagdtiger 88. There were also 2 RT in play. I'm platooned with Bringy and Beyond D, tier 7 platoon, and as per usual, as I say, it's just my playstyle. I tend to play passively at the beginning of games and then move into active mode, but because I'm quite well tiered here, there are only 2 tier 8s, I'm planning to do some of my own spotting. I'm not relying on my team to spot for me, at least not yet, so there we go. A beautiful shot on the side of a VK. We've reduced him to half health already. And look at this reload. Almost reloaded in time to get a second shot in. So I used bushes, wasn't spotted. And as I say, the biggest threat for me in this game is RT. That's the thing I'm worried most about, because as I say, during my play session, RT really wrecked this tank. But moving on, our team are going to be advancing up the hill. I'm cutting across. KV-4 camping spawn. Wow, okay, so he has a dream matchup and he decides to camp spawn. But here we go. As I say, normally I'm a little bit more passive, and even though I am playing passively here, I'm trying to get my own spots. Move up to the bush, let my Binox kick in. Binox have kicked in. There's a leopard on the hill, but there we go. Just spotted the Cheeto. And there we go. That's pretty much half his health gone. So I know I got spotted. Reverse, as I say, worried about RT. But the gun is behaving. I've fired twice. I've hit twice. And wait till I drop off radar. Move back up. I'm using a different bush this time, just in case. So moving up, you can see the poor gun depression here. Have to expose a lot of my tank in order to get my gun down. So you really got to understand the strengths and weaknesses of this tank. But I've moved up, let my Binox kick in, just waiting for more shots here, and here's the VK. And there we go. Shot went exactly where I wanted it to. Gun is behaving. Everyone's happy. 2-hit killed the VK. When this tank is shooting tier 7s, tier 6s, even tier 5s, it's an absolute monster. So, some people say it's overpowered. I think it's not really overpowered. I think it's overpowered if played by a good player. It's overpowered if it's top tier. But other than that, there are lots and lots of balancing factors for this tank. So, the Black Prince beside me is taking fire. I've moved up to another bush. Again, different bush than the one I was last spotted behind. And once again, letting my Binox kick in. Bringy is moving up the hill, so I know I'm pretty much safe from behind. We'll speed it up till something happens, because I think I spend quite a while here waiting. Doesn't look as if the enemy team are being very aggressive, and as I say, they've got an ELC hanging around who could spot me. And there are 2 RT in play. So, waiting. Okay, here we go. And take a snapshot. Okay, so, yes, I was tracking the tank. Take a snapshot and the gun misbehaves. So, first time in this game, the gun has misbehaved. I got spotted, and again, I'm moving erratically because I do not want to get hit by RT. And move up to, again, a different bush. So, move up. You can see my gun in the air. Got to move forward, get my gun down. There's the gun depression again. And we track the A43, so get a nice shot in. And surprisingly, I was already moving back, but that didn't get me spotted. So, T-34-85, very difficult shot. He's behind the wreck, but yeah, sometimes even the Russian gun fails. But yeah, there we go. So got spotted, have to reverse again. I am really surprised RT has left me alone. But if you look at the mini-map, we've got an IS moving down the 0 line, Bringy's on the 0 line, Beyond D has moved up, and this is where you get to use the speed and mobility of the tank. So our team are being aggressive, and I'm able to relocate really quickly. Now, as I say, I'm playing it more like a traditional tank destroyer. Major difference is I wasn't letting anyone else get the spots, I was spotting my own targets. But we're moving forward, doing 20 kilometers an hour through the water. And when you need to play this tank aggressively, it's great. When you need to play it passively, it's fine. It's a very, very versatile tank, but the enemy team are camping hard. So, moving up. And, oh, I don't know whether that's my spot, but AMX is looking at me. We fall back. He's side on to the tanks coming down the zero line, and he's paying the price. So he's had to back off, move up again, and again I'm struggling with gun depression, trying to get into a position where I can get my gun on target, take a blind shot, but miss. And don't get spotted. Okay. So, I'm going to advance, see if we can get any spots with our binocs. Trying to stay behind the bushes, and someone has spotted a Chiri. Not sure if that was my spot. It might have been, but aim in as long as I can, and the shot goes wide. Yeah, Russian gun. So look at the rate of fire. Here you get to see the rate of fire. Take a second shot, miss. Oh, there he is. He's over to the side. That was my spot. So aim, get another shot in. That's 383, slightly low roll, and Beyond takes him out. So I know there are two tanks over to my left. I'm already turning around so I can get shots. Our team are slowly advancing, so just sitting here with my binocs activated. Someone on my team needs to go forward and spot. And AMX, so side of an AMX, aim, 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 aim. As long as I need to, take him out for kill number 2. I don't actually get that many kills in this game, but I get a lot of assistance damage. And because I was spotting my own targets, I end up getting quite a lot of XP. But VK, I've been spotted. And you can see I'm on a slope, but there's that armor. So the armor works, especially when it's against lower tier tanks. But my biggest concern, as I say, is Arty. Our team are going to work on the VK. He's on fire. He's not going to live for long. Yag Tiger 88 kills him. So all the remaining enemy tanks are down in the corner. By the way, the KV-4 on the enemy team drowned himself. So, don't know what that was about. Top tier heavy camps and then drowns himself. Here we go, I've spotted Arty. And I miss. You've got to rush the shot. Shot before being fully aimed. And the Russian accuracy once again. Bringy gets the kill. So moving forward, using bushes, the camo rating on this tank is quite good. M12, have to adjust my hull. And Beyond gets the kill. Okay, no time to fire. Panther, okay, here we go. Side of a Panther, going for a track shot. Aim in, and track for 421. Now, Yag Tiger has spotted me, Panther has spotted me. So I've fallen back, we've bounced the Yag Tiger, Panther pens me. Panther gets taken out. And the Yag Tiger's spamming gold. But we've bounced, we're on a downward slope. Pens. Inconsistent armor. Does he get me again? Not quite sure, but I'm not on his radar. Bushes are solid. Push forward to see if I can get spots. Side of a Yag Tiger, and we finish him off. So 3,291 damage that I know of. Maybe some blind damage as well. So that was a first class game. No ace tanker games were picked up while I was playing games for this review. I think the SU-122-44 is a tank that's played very well by a lot of players, and as a result it's one of those tanks that's maybe a little bit more difficult to pick up an ace tanker in, but first class, and we picked up high caliber. And we got a first class with 1,319 XP. Normally I would expect that to be an ace on most tier 7 tanks, but nope, not the SU-122-44. 3,300 damage and 3 kills, but got to show off the tank, got to show off the maneuverability, the gun, the armor, the gun depression. I thought that was covered pretty much most of what I was talking about, and I pretty much showed why I used binocs instead of coated optics on the tank. My binocs ended up getting me 2,285 assistance damage. Main reason I used the binocs over coated optics, but we fired 15 and we only hit 9, so it felt more accurate during the game, but nope, only hit about half my shots. However, of the shots I hit, I penned 9, so the accuracy a little bit lacking, can troll you, but the penetration when you're shooting same tier, lower tier tanks, very, very good. Happy with the damage. You can see that the DPM is good, the rate of fire is good, the alpha damage is good. Spotted 3, damage 7, destroyed 3, and as I say, assistance damage down to the binocs. I ended up earning 93,000 credits with a premium account. Now this is an extremely good moneymaker. Because you can do so much damage so quickly in this tank, it is a very, very good moneymaker, and it's probably, in my opinion, a better moneymaker than tanks like the Super Pershing or maybe even the Panther 88. Make a lot of money in this tank. Okay, folks, time to sum up. Is the SU-122-44 worth 6,750 gold? Well, a lot of players describe this tank as overpowered or borderline overpowered, and I would tend to disagree. I don't think this tank is overpowered at all. I think it can be overpowered if it's top tier. I think it can be overpowered if it's been driven by a very, very good player who understands the strengths and weaknesses of the tank and can play it to its strengths. But on the other hand, it has a heck of a lot of weaknesses. Starting off with the matchmaking, this is a tier 7 premium tank, but it doesn't get special matchmaking. It will see tier 8s, it will see tier 9s, and a lot of what's great about this tank is cancelled because of the matchmaking. When it's top tier, it's great, but in a tier 8 or tier 9 game, it can suffer. So the matchmaking definitely goes against it. Hit points are very, very poor. 840 hit points is not good for a tier 7 tank destroyer, let alone a premium tank destroyer, so you are going to get 1 hit killed, you are going to get 2 hit killed, again down to that matchmaking, because you're going to be seeing tier 8s and tier 9s, and Arty is going to be able to 1 hit kill you as well. So hit points are a big negative for the tank. The armor is good. Again, the armor can be very good if it's top tier. In fact, it's quite good for a TD regardless, but on the other hand, because it sees tier 8s and tier 9s, the armor is a little bit lacking. Side armor's terrible, rear armor's terrible, and as I say, roof armor, absolutely terrible. HE does a lot of damage to this tank, and as I say, if you're unlucky and you're getting it into tier 9 games, you're a 2-hit kill. So the armor can be good, but only when it's top tier. In the main, I don't think the armor is fantastic. It's also a very, very light tank, so you're going to be taking a lot of ram damage. Anyone who tries to ram you is going to do a lot of damage to you. In addition, if you forget yourself and try to ram enemy tanks, you're going to be doing a lot of damage to yourself. The view range is absolutely pathetic. The view range is terrible. So 330 meters of view range absolutely has to be buffed, but even buffed, it's still not great, especially when you consider it gets into tier 9 games. So view range, big negative for the tank, and even as top tier, the view range is a little bit lacking. The gun handling is pretty poor on the tank. Not only do you have to contend with the usual Russian accuracy, 4.1 accuracy, so it's not an accurate gun. It's very, very troll, but you've also got to contend with long aim time, poor gun depression, very, very poor gun depression of only 4 degrees, and a very, very narrow gun arc, which makes it quite difficult to keep your gun on target, as well as the narrow gun arc, because you've got long aim time. As soon as you move your hull, you've got to go through that long aim time again, so it can be quite a troll gun to use. It's not the best crew trainer. I think it's better than a lot of people give it credit for, because you could train pretty much every crew from tier 2 up till tier 7, tier 8, but some of the higher tier tanks you're going to be missing a loader, so it's not a perfect crew trainer, but not as bad as people say. But probably the biggest negative against the tank is the cost. Yeah, the tank costs 6,750 gold, and when you put things into context, for just 500 to 700 or 800 extra gold, you can buy a tier 8 premium. You can buy a Super Pershing or a Panther 88 or an AMX CDC. So it's not a cheap tank, it's not an inexpensive tank, it's quite a significant layout to make for a tier 7 premium tank. But on the other hand, It is fast, it is really fast, 47.5 kilometers an hour top speed, and this tank can reach that top speed. It's very, very maneuverable. It's fast and it's maneuverable. What more could you want? 42 degrees per second traverse speed. You can play this thing like a medium tank if you need to, but it also means it's very, very flexible because you can get into position quickly, you can get out of position, you can run away, you can relocate. If you're having problems penning tanks from the front, you can easily relocate and get to the side to get side and rear shots, and that 170 millimeters of penetration, which is a negative in higher tier games, isn't such a problem when you're shooting the sides and rear of enemy tanks. So yeah, the speed and maneuverability and sheer flexibility of this tank are huge positives. I mean, you can play the tank passively, you can play it like a tank destroyer, or you can play it very aggressively, you can play it like a medium tank. So it's a lot of fun to play, and you can have a big influence in no matter what game or matchup you get into when you're in this tank. It's also got absolutely incredible DPM, or damage per minute. You can get it over 3,100, 3,200 with equipment and crew skills. Incredible DPM, and that just assuming you can pen enemy tanks, that incredible DPM means it's an absolutely incredible moneymaker. For a tier 7 tank, I think this tank is just as good a moneymaker as a lot of tier 8s, simply because you can do damage so quickly and so easily in this tank. It's a very, very good moneymaker for a tier 7. I probably make more money in this tank than I do in a tank like the Panther 88 or the Super Pershing. The armor can work. Now, while the armor really doesn't count for much when you get it into higher tier games, even then your gun mantlet can attract shots. When this tank is top tier, it is very good. The armor is very, very good for a tank destroyer, much better than it is on the SU-152 or the ISU-122S. So I think the armor can be a negative. It's not great, but it works. It can work, especially when you're top tier. And finally, this tank, because it's a tier 7 not a tier 8, it has the possibility of being top tier in a tier 7 game. So while a lot of premium tanks have 175mm guns, you got to remember most of those tanks happen to be a tier 8. And yes, the best matchmaking they'll get is top tier in a tier 8 game. But this tank gets 175mm at tier 7, and it has the possibility of being top tier in a tier 7 game, fighting against tier 5s and 6s. And that 175mm of penetration is more than good enough when it's top tier. So the matchmaking can be very, very poor, or it can be very, very generous to this tank. It's all down to luck. But overall, I had a lot of fun playing this tank for the review. As I say, normally I play over 20 games for a review, but sometimes when I'm having fun, I get up to 30 or even play more, just because I'm having fun and I forget I'm getting through so many games. It's a great tank. I really, really do like this tank. As I say, it has its problems. The gun can be very, very troll. Sometimes it behaves, sometimes it trolls you, sometimes it does both in exactly the same game. The view range is really, really poor, but I think that the DPM makes up for the poor gun handling. I think that the speed and maneuverability of the tank make up for the poor view range. I think it's a very, very solid tank. It's one of these rare premium tanks that's as good as any in-game tank. Really, there is nothing that is underpowered about this tank. Some players, as I say it's overpowered. I would say it's overpowered just when it gets the right matchup or the right player driving it. Very, very solid premium tank. Very, very good tank. Can't recommend it enough. Is it worth 6,750 gold? Yes, I definitely think so. Go out and buy one. You won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.